my biggest fear was bringing shame to the family. So I was a top performer and a true believer at the time that I left for college. And my memoir is about what happened after 4 generations of devotion and obedience that I found myself having to leave the Mormon Church because I didn't believe it anymore. And I had graduated a year early from high school. And I was planning to attend BYU, which is the Mormon University in Utah. But I had missed the application deadline. So I went to Utah State University planning to transfer after 1 year. But while I was there, I had taken a class with a professor I adored. He was a creative writing professor. And he found out that I was a believer, a Mormon and a believer. And he challenged me to take the Bible as literature class and warned me that he expected me to be able to defend my faith in class. And I was so naive. I was excited about the challenge. I was going to show him. And so to do that, I didn't go home in between the break between semesters and went to the library, ordered all these books about Mormons and Joseph Smith that had been forbidden to me to read, forbidden for all Mormons to read.
Wow.
And when I got them and started reading them, I was shocked. The narrative that I had grown up with was so different than what these historic scholars, researchers, and historians were saying about my great-great-uncle and his family, my great-great-grandfather, and the early days of the church, that I was stunned. And this was the first time I understood context for religion. And it was in context that I understood how Joseph Smith became this charismatic figure and developed this idea of a religion. It evolved from his family's belief in visions and magical folklore and spirits, and he was arrested for gold digging. He used to tell his neighbors that he had a special peepstone that he could put in a hat and look at, and it would tell him where buried treasure was could be found on his neighbor's land. And when it didn't happen, he was arrested and he absconded before he was sentenced. But it wasn't that big of a leap for me to see how he took that and then claimed to have found gold plates in a hillside near his farm in New York and claimed that they were gold plates. On these gold plates was the history of the ancestors of the Native Americans. Nobody ever saw these gold plates, but he said he had them, and that with a special stone, he could put it in a hat and look into it and translate this ancient record into English. And I mean, I think about it now and it seems so ludicrous to me. But at the time it was like, oh, wow, that's so cool.
Yeah.
But understanding context, there was a lot of religious ferment at the time that Joseph Smith started his church. And I only think that the Mormon Church survived as a separate entity and wasn't reabsorbed into the general evangelical movement was because this huge group of people moved and were isolated in Utah. where they remained isolated for the next 50 years, building a church. They called it the State of Deseret. And they felt like they were rebuilding Zion and preparing for the second coming.
Wow.
But by that time, Joseph Smith had been murdered. He had been arrested for burning down a printing press which I didn't think that was why he was arrested. I thought he was arrested because people were unhappy with what he was prophesying. But he had burned down a printing press that claimed he was practicing polygamy. That's what happened. That was the reason he was in jail. And an angry mob stormed the jail, and the guards basically walked away, and he and his brother were murdered.
Holy shit.
And my great-great-grandfather, Samuel, rushed to the scene on horseback, but got there too late. However, he was the next designated heir apparent to the church. But Brigham Young had designs on becoming the next prophet. First of all, my great-great-grandfather, Samuel, didn't want to practice polygamy and didn't think that was a good direction for the church to go. So all the rest of the hierarchy in the Mormon Church, they were practicing polygamy. And when I grew up, I didn't even know Joseph Smith was practicing polygamy. I thought it started with Brigham Young in Utah. But no, he had married 41 women in less than a decade.
Oh my God.
And
So
some
many.
as young as 14. And some who were already married to friends of his that he had sent away on missions to proselytize and bring in new converts.
Wow.
And Brigham Young had two henchmen who were notorious for getting rid of his enemies. One was a doctor. And when Samuel complained of a stomach ache, this doctor gave him some medicine, and he just got sicker and sicker and eventually died. So a month after Joseph Smith was murdered, my great-great-grandfather died of poison.
Yeah.
And his wife and Joseph Smith's remaining brother all claimed he had been poisoned by Brigham Young in an attempt to circumvent his appointment as the successor to Joseph Smith, which is why most of the people in Utah are not related to Joseph Smith. This left my great-grandfather an orphan, and he was farmed out to an uncle who then took him west with Brigham Young, and he settled in Utah. But Brigham Young was worried enough about him that he sent him on a mission to establish a settlement in Wyoming, because he didn't want an heir to the throne, so to speak, someone who had a bloodline connection to Joseph Smith making waves in Utah. I talk about all this. These were the facts that I was discovering. And Fawn Brody wrote a book called No Man Knows My History, and it's still one of the definitive biographies of Joseph Smith. And it felt like the trap door had opened underneath me, and I was absolutely shattered. The thing that had made me special, set apart, unique was I was so proud of my heritage and my connection. And now he looked like not only a scoundrel, but a con artist, a predatory womanizer, a liar. He cheated people out of money. He was despicable. And there was nothing about him that I was proud of anymore. And it left me absolutely unmoored.
Wow.
It took me a while to kind of absorb what I was reading, but I realized at some point, I think the nail in the coffin was when I found out that he had copied supposedly the special Mormon ceremonies, the rituals, and the ordinances from the Masons. Joseph Smith had become a Mason, and the secret handshakes and the words and some of the procedures were exact duplicates of the Masons' secret ceremonies.
Society,
And when I found that out, I was like, I can't believe that this is true. The narrative I've learned my whole life. It's just simply not true. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it.